You ever imagined how it feels to not be able to sleep on your bed, under your warm, soft sheets, but instead on a cold, hard street? Many people are suffering from being homeless all across the United States. Today, I will talk to you about the homelessness epidemic in America. I will talk to you about some statistics of homelessness, the origin of homelessness, what are the human consequences and causes behind this problem, and finally, a solution to the problem. In an article called HUD, Growth of Homelessness During 2020 Was Devastating, Even Before the Pandemic, by Pam Fessler, dated March 18, 2021. This article states, the nation's homeless population grew last year for the fourth year in a row. On a single night in January of 2020, there were more than 580,000 individuals who were homeless in the United States, a 2% increase from the year before. Also, more than 106,000 children were homeless during the once-a-year count conducted in most communities across the nation. While the majority of homeless children were in shelters or transitional housing, almost 11,000 were living outside. As has been the case for years, a disproportionate share of those experiencing homelessness were Black, about 39% of the total, though African Americans make up about 13% of the nation's overall population. 23% of those who were homeless last year identified as Hispanic or Latino. And California was the largest number of people experiencing homelessness. A quarter of all homeless individuals in the United States were living in either New York City or Los Angeles. For the first time since the government began doing the annual count, the number of single adults living outside exceeded the number of individuals living in shelters. Adding to the concern of housing advocates are signs that many more individuals have moved outside since the count was conducted because of the pandemic. Now let's talk a little bit about the origin of the problem. The term homelessness was first used in the United States in the 1870s. According to an article on the website, the National Center for Biotechnology Information, called The History of Homelessness in the United States, dated July 11, 2018. Homeless first became a national issue when people described as tramps traveled the country in search of work. And according to the article, the early 1980s marked the emergence of what now may be considered the modern era of homelessness. In the 80s, the major forces behind homelessness was due to poor areas in the inner cities experience an influx of middle class or wealthy people who renovated and built homes and businesses. When this happened, it resulted in an increase in property values and the displacement of earlier poorer residents. The other causes was a high unemployment rate, the emergence of HIV and AIDS, a low supply of affordable housing options, and the major budget cuts to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and social service agencies. During this time, the typical homeless person of the 1980s was less than 40 years old, and for the first time, women and families appeared in large numbers. It was found that many of these men and women that had been displaced from their homes struggled with undue burdens of co-occurring medical, psychiatric, and substance use disorders. But many were just simply living in poverty. What are some negative perceptions towards the homeless? According to the website frontsteps.org, in an article called Myths About Homelessness, dated September 11, 2020, the article discusses the many myths that surround people experiencing homelessness. These myths allow stereotypes to continue and can lead to hate. Some of the most prevalent myths are Housing should be a reward for reaching goals. Many believe that someone should earn housing by getting clean, getting a job, etc. But in fact, a growing body of research suggests that outcomes for sobriety, employment, and health increases when an individual is housed first. Another myth, homeless people don't work. But according to a 2002 national study by the Urban Institute, about 45% of homeless adults had worked in the past 30 days. A recent job loss is the second most common reason people say they become homeless. Another myth, shelters are a humane solution to homelessness, but in fact, it was found that large shelters are found to be notoriously overcrowded and often unruly places where people can experience long lines, waiting for bedding, public showers, there's thieves, and there's lots of conflict. So researchers and policymakers are optimistic about the prospect of ending homeless. What are some of the human costs behind this problem? Some of the human consequences behind this epidemic can be often experiencing feeling of isolation, loss of self-esteem, becoming institutionalized, increase in substance misuse, the loss of ability and will to care for oneself, increased danger of abuse and violence, an increased chance of entering the criminal justice system, the development of behavioral problems, sexual assault, and a broad range of acute and chronic illnesses. Becoming homeless is a psychologically traumatic event that commonly is accompanied by symptoms of anxiety and depression, sleeplessness, and loss of appetite. Sometimes homeless people try to medicate these feelings away with alcohol or drugs. What is the economic consequences of homelessness to the taxpayer? According to the website rootsclinic.org, in an article called How Much Would It Cost to End Homelessness in America, dated April 9th, 2021. The article states that the government spends an average of $35,578 per year for every person who must endure chronic homelessness. Much of this money goes towards publicly funded crisis services, including jails, hospitalizations, and emergency departments. So what are some of the causes of homelessness? Some of the economic causes of homelessness are a lack of affordable housing, unemployment, insufficient wages, lack of affordable health care, and using public resources and assistance. There can be contributing factors such as disasters, personal hardships, family troubles, having a disability, or an unexpected job loss. According to the website rootsclinic.org, in the article written April 9th, 2021, called How Much Would It Cost to End Homelessness in America, the lack of affordable housing and insufficient incomes are widely cited as the leading cause of homelessness. Since the 1980s, housing costs in metro areas have skyrocketed and wages stayed largely stagnant. As an example, a full-time minimum wage worker cannot afford a fair market rate two-bedroom apartment anywhere in America without clocking 97 hours. So without the push to raise the minimum wage, people will continue to struggle. And according to the website of housesoupkitchen.org, they state that the rental discrimination is so rampant in the US that a law was even created to prevent it. Despite this, it is still pretty common. It's not unheard of for people to be turned out of rental homes just because of their color, race, or religion. How do we end homelessness? I believe homelessness is the work of each community working together. I would fight for all towns, cities to have affordable housing. I would push for the increase of the minimum wage. And then there needs to be improvements, obviously to our current policies, and educate the public about this epidemic. At the federal level, Congress should invest in proven solutions to to homelessness by providing more money for homeless assistance grants. The government also needs to give out more money towards families to help pay a percentage of their rent based on income. There are many countries that have much greater success than the United States when confronting homelessness. Housing needs to be treated as a human right. Many politicians belittle the problem and aim for more modest goals. In conclusion, many people in our country are suffering from being homeless. I hope you now have an understanding of some of the consequences and causes of homelessness. Furthermore, we can help to end homelessness in small ways. Give to your local food bank. Help build or fix up houses or shelters by checking with your local public housing authority. Attend neighborhood and public meetings and speak up in favor about homelessness prevention programs and shelters. These are just some ways you can make a difference for some of the men, women, and children who are homeless.